الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with the أحكام الأسرة or the rulings with regards to the family and marriage and divorce and the like of that from the book of Risala al-Fiqh al-Muyassar. And it's very brief as we see, so it doesn't include all the different masail in there, and we're almost done inshallah ta'ala. And then as mentioned before, after we're done, we'll go to another book that has the same title, but it's only Al-Fiqh al-Muyassar, to finish the rest of the chapters inshallah. We stopped at where he says ما يسن وما يحرم في النكاح. ما يسن وما يحرم في النكاح. ما يسن, that means what's recommended from the meaning of the sunnah from the fiqh perspective. That means whoever does it, he gets rewards. Whoever doesn't do it, it's not a sin, but it's definitely encouraged and it should be applied. وما يحرم في النكاح, and what's haram in a nikah or the marriage contract, and some of the rulings that are not permissible. He mentioned few of them. We go through them inshallah ta'ala. He says يسن, the first one, يسن نكاح امرأة واحدة لمن خاف عدم العدل دينة أجنبية بكر ولود جميلة. So he says here, it's recommended to marry only one for the one that fears that he won't be just. It's recommended for the man to marry only one wife if he fears that عدم العدل, that he won't be just, because to be just with the wives, this is a must, of course. And the one that is not just, he comes in the day of judgment, إحدى شقيه, as the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, one shoulder is higher than the other. So he comes in the day of judgment exposed with this evil action that he did. So, but it's only, as here this is a subject, which is better, one or more, according to the hukm shari, then it's different to individuals. So in general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ, that it's permissible for the man to marry up to 4. This is according to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, as the ulama, they say, it can be different from one person to the other. Depends on the benefits and the harms that might come as a result of this. And as they also mentioned, that al-ghayra, or the jealousy from the woman's side, is not a sufficient reason or a harmful thing, because this is a normal thing. This is something that it cannot be removed. But if that's the only problem, that means this is a successful thing. And since the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is at all times, at all places valid, so this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted. But here the mas'ala here, the one that fears Adam al-Adl, the one that fears that he won't be able to be just, then it is what is best for him is to keep it as one. He says here dayyina, that means she's upon the deen, which is the subject of even the khitbah or engagement is mentioned at the end. And many of the fuqaha, of course, they would mention that in the beginning of the subject of a nikah. He mentioned here some of these rulings. So the characteristics that are mentioned for someone to seek in the future or the potential wife, that she is dayyina, she is religious. Ajnabiyya, ajnabiyya means she is not related. He mentioned that here. She's not related, blood related to the person. We know that certain relationships are forbidden for the person to marry his maharim. And that's very specifically detailed in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Other than the maharim, it's permissible for a person to marry. So in the deen of Islam, one's cousin, for example, is permissible for a man to marry his cousin. There's nothing wrong with that. But some of the ulama, they said it's better not to. And it's not because of diseases and other things that people say. There's no proof of that whatsoever. But it's not because of this. And Fatima radiallahu anha, she was married to Ali radiallahu anha, and they're cousins. So it's not about that. It's about, as they mentioned, and it's different also from one situation to the other. Because if something happens, if they divorced, for example, then this can cause to sever the relationship between families. So this is the thing where they mention it's better that they don't know each other. So if something happens, it's not going to break the ties between families, and it happens all the time. So that's what the wisdom behind this. But it's valid, it's permissible, there's no harm. Bikr, that means never been married before. Walud, walud, that means she gives birth. Gives birth. How will a person know that a woman gives birth when she's bikr? She never been married before. They say like something that is known in her family, for example, that it's they have this in them. So walud, and he says jamila, meaning beautiful, to protect oneself from the fitan and to make it easy for the person to have husn al-mu'ashara and good living and things of that nature. So this is something that, and as we know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to the man or the future or the potential husband, إِذَا جَاءَكُم مَّن تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ. Whoever comes to you and you're pleased with his religion and his manners, then get him married. So the two things, these two qualities specifically for men, his religion and his manners. And as mentioned before, the manners is part of the religion. But why manners are specifically mentioned after mentioning the religion? Because the woman and the men, when it comes to the rights in marriage, he's supposed to be extremely kind to his wife, and she's supposed to be obedient to him. So this is the perfect balance when they have towards one another. And if the woman is righteous and she get married to someone that is not righteous or he has bad manners, then it becomes very difficult for her. Why? Because she wants to please Allah by being obedient to her husband. But the husband is someone that has bad manners. So it makes the matter extremely difficult for her. And that's again for the waliya of the woman. This is his responsibility to the best of his ability to make sure that it's not someone that would cause all kinds of harm. So the religion and the akhlaq and the manners are mentioned for the men. So this is again in brief, he mentioned it like this, and then he says the next one, يستحب لمن أراد خطبة امرأة أن ينظر منها إلى ما ليس بعور. The mas'ala of is it permissible for the man to look at the woman that he wants to marry? لمن أراد خطبة امرأة. الخطبة is the engagement, and الخطبة has rulings, has أحكام, rulings, and الخطبة is not marriage. الخطبة is just definition of it is وعد بالزواج. It's a promise for marriage, nothing else. So it does not permit what Allah forbade. So they cannot be alone, they cannot see each other and talk with each other and all of this unless there's an exception. That's why he says here, يُسْتَحَبُّ لِمَنْ أَرَادَ. It's recommended for the one that wants to have khitbah or to be engaged or to intend to marry a woman, أن ينظر منها إلى ما ليس بعورة, that he would see from her what's not awrah. So it's recommended that he sees her and she sees him also. So that as the Prophet ﷺ, when a man asked him, he said, because this is أحرى أن يؤدم بينكما أو بينهما, that means it's more likely that it would bring the goodness between them. Someone marrying someone that never seen before, what if he sees something that he doesn't like? So the al-qabul or the acceptance has to be there. But these types of things, this is a note on the side. We're living at times when, for the most part, we have been corrupted, as generations and after generations. It used to be in the past where a man is growing up, he doesn't see anyone except his mother and sister and so on. So the people used to be content. They're not going after, he wants to have, and people when they're corrupted or when they see things and sins are all over the place, then people start to compare. I want something like this or something like this or looks like this. Where did he get this from? It's all from sins for the most part, right? But that's why people in the past used to be more content. And the issues of how being very specific with things used to be much less than that. But anyway, this is realizing the reality that we're in. Yes, and the Prophet ﷺ said for the men to go see, so that this is something that would make them easy for them to establish the relationship. But as you see, this is exceptions. So he sees what's not awra, وَمَا يَدْعُو إِلَى نِكَحِهَا بِلَا خَلْوَةٍ. and what make him want to marry her then without khalwa. That's why some of the ulama, they mentioned more, meaning, for example, that he would, sometimes with the permission of the guardian, that he would see her without her knowing that he is looking at her, in a way that, as you might see this in the books of fiqh, that you'd see a little bit more, like the neck, for example, the clothing that are, she would sit at ease at home, but not, not something that would be extreme. But again, this is something to be done with the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without khalwa, of course, without being alone. And the way it's to be done is the man that if he wants to marry someone, then he would go and speak to her wali, her guardian, and then they would take the matter from that perspective. And as we said before, then it's for her to be taken her permission, whether she accepts or not. And the permission of al-bikr, the one that is never been married before, is, how does she agree? Is simatuh, when she's silent, because she's shy. And if she disagrees, then she says no. But if she's silent, that means she accepts. If she doesn't want to, then she says no. If she's been married before, then her permission is to say yes. And if she doesn't want to, then she says no. So ليكون على بينة من أمر. So the subject of what to be seen. وللمرأة أن تنظر إلى خطيبها كذلك, and also the woman to see her khatib, the one that is intended to marry her, also they can see each other. Once they saw each other and they are pleased with what they saw, that issue of seeing is taken care of. The chemistry is there when it comes to seeing, if it's correct to say. Then it's not permissible to see each other anymore. Why would they want to see each other anymore? They're forbidden from one another. They're not married till they get married. Can they speak if there's say, for example, what they said and they saw one another, but it wasn't sufficient, it was dark, this and that? Okay, have a second time, no problem. But then after that, once they see what they need to see, then it's done, and they sit and talk with each other. But the extreme of having to know every single matter, big and small, you would never know the other side by speaking to them. If you're sitting in a setting like this, you won't say how bad you are and how temper you are and how evil you are. You'll say all kinds of nice things. But that's why it's to ask about the person from the righteous ones, those who mingle with them and things like this. So once they agree, then they don't see each other till the contract, till they get married. Then it's a husband and wife. And again, if there's something needed, and now we have all these types of communications, these things should be avoided whatsoever, and not to be at ease with it, especially with something like this, because things will develop. Okay, they intended to get married, and they set the time for the nikah is to be after 3 months. Now they're communicating with each other. If it was someone else, maybe it's okay in some situations, but this, no. Why? Because things will develop as a normal thing. So that should be avoided completely, because it's haram. Just to make it easy, we're not into talking all kinds of things here. It's the khitbah here is what promised to get married. So it does not permit what Allah forbade till the marriage contract is there. So these things that the Sharia allow as an exception to make sure that a person would agree or not. He says, as another extension to this, إلا ما يتيسر للخطيب النظر إليها. He's not able to see her, or he's not sure, of what he saw. بعث إليها امرأة ثقة تتأملها ثم تصفها له. He can send a woman that is trustworthy, his mother, his sister, whatever, then she can see her, and then she describes that woman to him. And this is haram if it's in another setting. لا تصف المرأة, as the Prophet ﷺ clearly said, a woman is haram for her to describe another woman to another man, whether it's her husband, her son, whatever. It's not permissible whatsoever. Unless in a situation like this, that he wants to get married to her, then in that case, she can describe with the limitation of it, so that things are not at ease with this matter. And that's one of the things that people, they have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this. The next point, يحرم. Now this is haram. يحرم على الرجل أن يخطب على خطبة أخيه حتى يذر أو يأذن. It's haram for a man أن يخطب, that means he makes خطبة or engagement على خطبة أخيه. على خطبة أخيه, how they translate it in English?
It's forbidden for a man to propose to a woman if another brother has already proposed to her.
Okay, so it's with explanation. See how the Arabic أن يخطب على, because the hadith is like this. نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يخطب الرجل على خطبة أخيه. Like it's not permissible to make khitbah on the khitbah of his brother. So if someone made a khitbah, that means proposed to a woman, then it's not permissible for someone else to come along and to also to propose. Especially, of course, if he knows. If he doesn't know, then there's no harm. But this is not permissible. حتى يذر أو يأذن. Till he leaves, that means he changes his mind, or they told him, sorry, it's not going to happen. Or he would permit him because he's done with it. You know, he's not going to go further. So that's forbidden. The same thing as we talked about buying and selling. It's not permissible to someone is bargaining or purchasing something that another seller comes along and he would say, you know, I'll give it to you cheaper. That's not permissible. You know, so if they are in the deal. So the same here when it comes to the khitbah. He says يباح, but for the guardian or for the family of the girl, for example, they can look into more than one situation at the same time. But what's forbidden is that a man would know that someone is proposing and he would go and also try to propose. The next one, يباح التصريح. This is in the subject of talaq, and it's ideal when we talk about talaq and the ahkam of the talaq, then we mention this, but maybe briefly we can try to understand it, inshallah. First of all, it says يباح التصريح والتعريض في خطبة معتدة لمن طلقها طلاقا بائنا دون الثلاث. How does that is said in English? Did they? يباح التصريح. It's permissible to be explicit or?
It says it is forbidden to make an explicit statement of proposal to a woman who is fulfilling her mourning period, or for the woman who is fulfilling her waiting period after her third month.
That's the explicit. No, actually, okay, the first one here, يباح التصريح. There is something here that we need to, what is تصريح and what is تعريض? We're talking about الخطبة, the rulings of engagement. Can a person propose to a married woman? Is it permissible? The answer is no. That's a very obvious one. So to propose, it's not always permissible. So certain situations, it's haram to propose, to even to make khitbah, to propose to marry someone. Here is the case when a woman is divorced. When a woman is divorced, or the relationship between her and her husband is severed in one way or the other. There are many different ways. If it's a divorce, either it's a revocable divorce or an irrevocable divorce. Either talaq ba'in or غير ba'in. Meaning, as we know that the talaq is 3. If it's the first time, then there is the idda period. And they call this talaqun raj'i. We're briefly talking about talaq here. Talaq raj'i, that means it's a revocable divorce. And there's a waiting period, 3 menses. In this period, if he gives her the first talaq or the second talaq, they are living together. And if they go back together, whether it's with relations or with, actually, you would say, I take you back and things like this, it counts as a divorce. And he has the right to take her back if he wants to. And the marriage is still there. So it's not permissible for anyone to propose to a woman that is divorced, the first or the second divorce, and she's still in the waiting period. And this is تصريحا وتعريضا. تصريحا is explicitly say, I want to marry you, with whatever, any statement that gives this direct, explicit meaning. Or a ta'rid is to make it an implicit one. To say, I want to get married. someone like you, everyone wants to marry her, something like this, that means this is ta'reed. This is not directly that he's saying that he wants to marry her, but he's saying that, that he wants to marry, but not now. He cannot marry her now. He can marry her after the iddah is over. But in the talaq al-raj'i, the first one, it's haram both. Tasrih and ta'reed. Both are forbidden. To say it explicitly or implicitly. This is if it's after the first divorce or the second divorce. If it's after the third one, right? A husband divorced his wife 3 times. That means what? It's forbidden for her to go back to him. Unless she marries someone with the intention that that marriage is forever, not as a trick. She would marry someone because she wants to get married, whatever, after the marriage and after the iddah. And if divorce happened from that other marriage, and then after the waiting period, then she can go back to the previous husband. But after the third divorce, she still have a waiting period. She still have a iddah after the third divorce. That means it's not permissible for her to get married after the first divorce in the iddah. And the jumhur upon the iddah that it's still the 3 menses, and some said only 1 month or 1 menses. But anyway, if it's 3 and it's not permissible for her to get married, then they say it's permissible to propose to a woman like this, but not with tasrih, not explicitly, but with an indirect way. That's after the third divorce, right? After the third divorce, or the one that her husband died and her iddah, while she is the iddah for the widow is 4 months and 10 days. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated that clearly in the Quran. إلا ولا توعدون سرا إلا أن تقولوا قولا معروف. So you can say it in an implicit way, in an indirect way, if it's within the iddah period. So he says here, let's read it again. يباح التصريح والتعريض. التصريح is to be explicit. والتعريض is to say it in an indirect way. Both are permissible في خطبة المعتدة, in the khitbah of the one in her iddah period. لمن طلقها طلاقا بائنا دون الثلاث. The one that he divorced her, طلاقا بائنا, irrevocable divorce. دون الثلاث, less than 3. The irrevocable divorce, that means the period, then it's finished. That means he can. Or after the 3. This is, it should not be misunderstood here. So الطلاق البائن, meaning that it's irrevocable. So here يباح التصريح والتعريض, this is after, meaning, which is a normal thing after the iddah is over. يحرم التصريح. The تصريح is haram. Explicitly it's haram. And indirectly it's haram لمطلقة رجعية في عدتها. When the woman is مطلقة, she is divorced, طلاق رجعي. رجعي, coming back, meaning revocable. It can be revoked in her iddah. So it's easy, right? So it's haram if we're talking about the iddah. Now the woman, if she's not in the iddah, anybody can propose, right? And she's not married. But if she is in the iddah, what is the iddah? The waiting period. The waiting period either can be after the first or the second divorce, or after death of the husband, or after khul'a even, right? There's a khul'a waiting period also for the khul'a. And there is after the 3 divorce. These are the types of iddah that the woman wait. She cannot marry after these things happens. If it's the first and the second divorce, tasrih and ta'reed are forbidden. Explicitly, indirectly, this is all forbidden. To propose while she's in the iddah after the first and the second divorce. In the iddah period. In the waiting period after the third divorce, and after khul'a, and after death, it's okay to say it in an indirect way, in the iddah, but not explicitly, till the waiting period is over. Is it clear? Everybody understand, or it's confusing? Yeah, nothing is allowed after the first and the second divorce, and it's still in the waiting period. If the waiting period is over, the talaq is ba'in. Ba'in, that means it's irrevocable, but it's sughra. They call it minor irrevocable divorce, because the husband can take her back, but with a new contract if the waiting period is passed. So here is the issue of the khitbat al-mu'tadda. We're talking about the mas'ala of the khitbah, or the engagement or proposing to a woman in her iddah period, in her waiting period. It's forbidden after the first and the second divorce, both. تصريح والتعريض explicitly and implicitly. After the third divorce, after خلع, after death of the husband in the waiting period, what's permissible is التعريض, the indirect one, but not التصريح. If the عدة period is finished, both are okay. طيب, one last thing here he mentioned is يسن, that means it's recommended, العقد يوم الجمعة مساء لأن فيه ساعة إجابة ويسن بالمسجد إن تيسر. It's recommended to make the عقد of the marriage on the day of جمعة مساء, that means before maghrib, after عصر before maghrib, لأن فيه ساعة إجابة, because the ساعة الإجابة, the hour of acceptance of the dua is there in the before maghrib in the day of جمعة. ويسن, and it's recommended to be in the masjid إن تيسر, if it's easy. And this is, there's no hadith or anything like that, but it's some of the early generations of Islam used to like this because it's the day of Jumu'ah, it's a blessed day, and especially when the last hour of the Jumu'ah where the dua is accepted, and people would make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their barakah, as the Prophet ﷺ used to say after the marriage contract is done, he would say barakallahu lakuma, baraka alaykuma, wa jama'a baynakuma fi khayr aw ala khayr, making dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless their marriage and bring them together with matters of goodness. So some, they recommended this. But there's no evidence again from the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Clear? So as you see, this is just some of the rulings of the matter of al-khitbah. And then after that, the next chapter is actually talks about some of the ahkam or the rulings that is related to women. Some of the ahkam related to women, and some of it is I don't want to say controversial, but contemporary issues, and there might be some differences of opinions among the ulama in. So we'll go through them inshallah ta'ala briefly starting from next time. And it's basically like in most of it in the categories of like fatawas or as'ila or questions, but it's different masail specifically related to it. Then after that we'll be done with the book inshallah. طيب, we'll take the hadith. But actually, let me, that next chapter, before he talks about the masail, he says that تمهيد لما كان لما كان خطاب الشارع المكلفين ينقسم إلى 3 أقسام. تمهيد means introduction. خطاب الشارع is the legislator, the deen of Islam, addressing المكلفين, those who are responsible for their actions, the adults, is divided into 3 types. قسم خاص بالرجال, some rulings are only for men. Some of the rulings like Salatul Jama'ah, obligatory, like this, Salatul Jumu'ah, only men are addressed by these things. قسم خاص بالمرأة, another type of rulings that is only for women. That is according to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created women in what makes them unique in their creation, and the same thing for men. So this is 2 types of rulings there. وقسم مشترك بينهما, and there are the 3rd category of rulings that is mushtarak, common between them. Both men and women, they supposed to give zakah. Both men and women, most of the ahkam actually are the same for both men and women, except the things that is unique in the way that Allah created the man versus the woman. Then you would find, hijab, for example, these types of things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of the human beings, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise, and that's why the rulings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect in how it's dealing with both the different genders and so on. So he says, أحببت في هذه المسائل أن أذكر أو أن أذكر أهم الأحكام الفقهية. He said, he wanted in these masail to come some of the fiqh matters that is specific to women. And he says, معظم الأحكام, even though most of the rulings, both men and women are the same in it. And he said, ذكرتها قبل في الأقسام الثلاثة التي تقدمت. It's mentioned in the previous thing, but this is only what is specifically for women. And he mentioned then afterwards, how many mas'ala here? 21, still going. Oh, that's it. I think it's 21 mas'ala, 21 matters. Okay. So we'll continue that inshallah ta'ala next time. Let's take the hadith. think when in Kitab, the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi and the completion of the 50 by Rajab, we I think 130. Let me see. The next in line is 131. Hadith 131. What is that? So, عن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يحل دم امرئ مسلم إلا بإحدى ثلاث. Again, لا يحل دم امرئ مسلم. دم امرئ مسلم إلا بإحدى ثلاث: الثيب الزاني الثيب الزاني والنفس بالنفس والتارك لدينه المفارق للجماعة. والتارك لدينه المفارق للجماعة. رواه البخاري ومسلم. So this hadith by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, لا يحل دم امرئ مسلم إلا بإحدى ثلاث. It's not permissible the blood of a Muslim except by one of three things. That means the حفظ النفس, to guard the life of the Muslim. This is one of the objectives of the deen, one of the objectives of the rulings of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except in three cases where the people of authority are entrusted to implement these criminal laws, if it's correct to say, where that's why the subject here is about ad-dima, and shedding blood is one of the worst sins that can ever be committed on the face of earth. And the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge among people in the day of judgment with regards to the ad-dima, with regards to the blood. And you can imagine how many people killed unjustly in this life since the time of Adam alayhi salam and the sons of Adam. The one that killed his brother, he will get all of the sins of those who killed afterwards, as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said. And everyone will come in the day of judgment, as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, al-qatil, the killer, or the maqtul, I'm sorry, the one that was killed in this world, he will get the one that killed him in this dunya and drag him till he brings him in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he would say, Sal hadha lima qatalani, or limadha qatalani. Oh Allah, ask this man or ask this person, why did he kill me? And then he would take from his hasanat if he has, and he would put from his sayyat on him. So, and this is how things will be in the day of judgment. So the blood, the subject of the blood is not an easy matter. And even the Prophet ﷺ warned to even help, if a person helps someone to shed blood, even bishatri kalim, even with a half of a word to approve such an evil thing, this is as if he killed. So anyway, so it's only three cases where it's permissible, not for the individuals to do it, but for those who are in charge to implement this. Against al-thayyib al-zani, al-thayyib al-zani. Al-thayyib is the one that, al-zani is the adulterer, and al-thayyib is the one that he is married, or he was married before. Someone that had a previous marriage, or he's married in a sound marriage, and he committed zina, committed adultery, whether it's male or female. The punishment is al-rajm bil-hijab, to be stoned with death. This is the ruling from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الثيب الزين. والنفس بالنفس, النفس بالنفس. Someone killed someone, then he is to be killed by the one that he killed him, by the people of authority. And that also, not every case, the rulings has to be applied. Not someone defending himself, for example, or someone that did not know what he's doing. It has certain rulings to be done. But with a nafs bin nafs, the asaba, the family of the deceased, they have the right to pardon, which is unique in the deen of Islam. If they all agree to take the blood money, because it's either to apply the capital punishment upon him, if it's all evidence and everything is established and he did it intentionally and all these types of things. And if they all agree that they would pardon him, they can. And actually, the Qadi, the judge, would encourage them to pardon him, and he would remind them their great rewards and so on. But they have the rights to say no, and they all have to agree. I'm sorry, they all have to agree to kill him. Actually, if someone disagree, then it goes to the next one, which is the blood money, or they can even forgive that and they don't take anything. So, but in general, النفس بالنفس. And when, of course, this is not the end of it. There are many different rulings to this, and this is also on the subject of al-fiqh. The third one, التارك لدينه المفارق للجماعة. The one that leaves his religion and he turns away from the jama'ah of the Muslimin, which is the murtad, the one that renegade away from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and unless he returns back to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that also with certain rulings to be applied, and that means someone, they would sit with him and they would show the matter to him and things like this. So these are the three cases, and it's these types of things is not again left to the individuals, but it's by the people of authority. If they don't apply it, then it's not for the individuals to apply this. This is like the judicial system in Islam. And these types of rulings is the objectives of it, which is the maqasid to حفظ الدين, to protect the deen of the people. This is part of the objectives of these rulings, to protect the life of the people, to protect the wealth of the people, to protect their honor and dignity. So all of these objectives, you would find it applied in the ahkam. بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.